To stand alone, or to fight side by side against the encroaching forces of oblivion.
Welcome back everyone to Exotic Grunt Gaming, and today I'm going to be bringing you my second Magicka Sorcerer PvE build. This time, no pet. Some of the things are still the same between the two loadouts, the gear loadouts and everything. CP doesn't change, but I'll go over it. Abilities do change, obviously, and rotation will change, and just some other minor things that have changed with this patch that I've chosen to go towards that have worked out for me. But first, I just want to start out by kind of explaining why I've moved away from the pet build. Not necessarily not using it, but wanting to also pull the same DPS without it. And the reason being is because in the past few trials, and especially the most recent one, your pet will sometimes take way too much damage, and you never ever want to be using Conjured Ward or your shields to shield your pet. If it happens to shield your pet because you're staying alive, that's fine. But a lot of the times I've had my pet actually die from some of the AoEs. One of the most popular ones is on Vet SO. If you're doing hard mode and she does the World Shaper attack and you have to dodge roll out, your pet isn't going to make it. Your pet's going to die from it. You got to recast it every single time, and that World Shaper starts coming up a lot. And in the new trial especially, there is so much ground damage and AoEs that are coming off from the last fight and in each of the three fights, and I can't even imagine doing hard mode and having all three of those mechanics at once, let alone individually. So you're gonna find yourself, if you're using the pet build, having to recast it, and that's been my experience. And I enjoy using the pet build, and for vet dungeons it still outperforms the non-pet build solely because of AoE damage. You're not worried about staying alive. You're not necessarily worried about, you know, your pet dying, because it's most likely not going to, and the amount of AoE damage that it does to adds and fights is insane. But when you get into, you know, vet trials, you need to have consistent DPS, and unfortunately I just wasn't hitting consistent DPS having a pet and having to recast it so often. And so that's why I want to do this, and I want to share it with everybody, so anybody playing the Magicka Sorcerer, I know a lot of people had viewed my pet build from Horns of the Reach, so hopefully those same people, maybe they are using pet build and they want to move to something else, and hopefully this can provide that second approach. This loadout is more difficult to come by than my pet build, but there are some other options that still work well, and I will discuss those soon. But as of right now, we have 64 in Magicka, 0 in health, 0 in stamina, obviously. Spell damage unbuffed is 2483, and spell damage buffed, it's about 3k. It's a little low, but it performs just as well as the pet build. Other things to note is we're using a new Mundus Stone. We're using the Apprentice to increase our spell damage by 345. That's important. Helps out a lot, and just having that raw spell damage it helps push that threshold for DPS. Now I guess we'll go into gear, because I always think that's important and people really want to see that. We've moved back to kind of the old setup, and that includes Alhambris. We use a 5-1-1 setup, so 5 light for the passives in our light skill line, and then we use heavy and medium just for more resources, getting that Undaunted passive, which is metal, and command helps as well. But for those 5-1-1 setup, this helps a lot with getting more health. Now I know my health is sitting pretty low right now, and that's because I moved from the pet build to this. And so what you're going to want to do is you're probably going to want to put a health glyph, health enchant on one of your big pieces. maybe your legs. That way if you go back to your pet build, you can have that, because the pet gives you a certain amount of health percent increase when it's active. So you lose that when you're not running the pet build, and you're going to want to get a little more health, because right now we're sitting at something like, what, 15,124. You really want to be more than 16. I know a lot of people recommend 17. I've been able to do vet trials with 16.2, 16.3, and it's fine. So food that we're using is, just cover this quickly, Witch Mother's Potent Brew, Essence of Spell Power, all that same stuff. Now there's something neat to note here. I'll get into it later, but Major Prophecy, there's a bug with it. So if you're active on the forums and the developers listen to you, please make this known. I'll post something. Hopefully people watching this video can also bring some attention to it. I'll touch base on it in a little bit once I get done with the gear and we get into the skills and our rotation, but there is an issue with Major Prophecy and these spell pots, and it's not just on the Magsork, it's on anybody using it. But I'll cover that in a sec. Let's finish up on gear. So what we're doing now is we're running the Alhambris set, because it's still the strongest for the Magsork in terms of monster sets. The One Piece Ice Heart with Julianos and whatnot wasn't working well enough for me, and that's because we want to run the VMA staff. If you do not have a Maelstrom staff, you can, and almost recommend running 5 Julianos, 5 Netch's Touch, and then like 1 Ice Heart and 2 Julianos staves. Strongly advise that, because you are going to keep that spell damage from Julianos. When you run VMA staff now, it's no longer an enchantment, it's actually a set bonus, having that light and heavy attack dealing additional damage to enemies in your wall of elements. It does carry over to your front bar from my testing, so that's good. However, the spell damage that originally was part of that enchantment was dropped completely, because now you can actually enchant the weapon. So we use a weapon damage and spell damage enchant, which has really strong uptime, which you'll see in the parse and the combat metrics. You'll see at the end of the parse something like 57% on the parse I did. But when you swap bars, if you're using a Julianos front bar and you go to your back bar, you drop 300 spell damage, and it's just too much now. At least when in the last patch, and I discussed this in my pet build, but when you went from Julianos to VMA in the last patch, you only lost like 110 spell damage. Now you're losing the full 300 from the Julianos staff, because you're not getting any back from VMA. So I was now able to push more damage going back to the old setup. And I don't have the Moondancer jewelry, but you can get the Netch's Touch jewelry just as easy. And once I start running more VMAW and more clears on it, I'm going to start using the gold jewelry and then all gold Netch's Touch armor. But you don't even, it's like not that big a difference in DPS. I mean, I haven't necessarily tested it, but testing with all gold gear to some purple, especially on jewelry, it's not going to make a difference, so don't go crazy about it. And then we run 4 Moondancer, getting that extra 5% damage bonus. I mean, Moondancer and Necro on the pet build perform just as well as the 1 Ice Heart with Julianos and Necro. And really all that changed is that VMA spell damage dropping, and us able to get the 4-piece bonus on the front bar, giving us that 129 spell damage, and then running that enchant on the back. But it just, this overall boosts our damage just enough. You could run 1-piece Ice Heart still and like a 4th Moondancer, and you could have like 100% uptime on that spell damage, but it doesn't do as much DPS having extra 129 spell damage as much as the Alhambris gives us, which is like over 1000 DPS throughout the whole fight. So this setup has worked well for me. Obviously all divines. Lucky enough to have a Moondancer lightning staff and it be infused, so that helps out a lot, and that pushes a little bit more damage. And then a VMA lightning staff. Sharpened is not the best trait. I only have it right now because I don't have enough of those what are they called? Transmute crystals Still need like 33 more now. But you're gonna want to make that Nern honed. That's gonna be the best. Precise is good as well. I think I have a precise on another character, but Nern honed is best in slot, and it's gonna even help as well with AoE damage that you do to multiple adds. We're going to champion points now. I like to do 20 in Warlord. You can put a little bit more in it. However, I've been finding that in a lot of the trials, I'm dodge rolling quite a bit as well. So I like to kind of split them a little bit. Again, just something to note, and it's not optimized completely here just because of the percent differences and still earning 10 more CP from this patch in each tree, but you're going to want to make sure that you have the closest to, say, 10%. And that's not for everything, but my point is, if you're at 9.99%, it's going to round down. You're only going to get 9% of that extra reduced cost of roll dodge. So you want to try and get it as low as you can, rounded down. So for here, we'd want maybe like 2 more points, so it's 10%, if that makes sense. But what I run is 100 Arcanist. I like to get a lot more magic recovery. I have really like 0 sustain issues on this build. And if you ever do, you just put a second heavy attack on your front bar or on your back bar, and you'll be fine. But that requires elemental drain being applied to get that minor Magicka steal, and also having 100% uptime on your pots. If you're not doing that, you are going to run into some sustain issues, but Witchmother's Potent Brew helps with that. And then since we do a heavy attack on our rotation, having tenacity is important, because almost 15% extra magic restored from our heavy attacks. And we do one every rotation, so we're getting a good amount of magic back from that. So that's green. Blue, this is the most important. I run 50 in Elfborn. Again, you want to get it up to 19%, so I need 1 more point in there, and it's rounded down exactly at 19% instead of 18. Elemental Expert is pretty close to 11, but you get an extra 11% putting 50 in there. I put 42 in Spell Erosion. I like to have a little bit more penetration, especially for parsing, but this brings pretty close to the penetration cap, especially depending on your group composition and trials, which you want to figure out. Are they running, you know, Torigs and getting that extra damage on, or extra penetration from their weapon enchantments? Are you using Alkosh? So things like that you need to consider. Put 6 in Staff Expert, because we do a lot of direct damage with our light attacks. And then obviously 75 in Thaumaturge, because we're setting our enemies off balance ourselves with our blockaded storms, and we get an extra 10% damage to them. So this is always pretty much the same. And then Ironclad, Spell Shield. The red tree really does depend on the trial that you're doing and the content that you're doing, so this will change. So I'm not gonna like touch upon it crazy right now, because we're still trying to figure it out for the new trial, the Asylum Sanctum. So we're still trying to figure that out. But let's go into skills now. So what we run on the front bar, and this is loaded out, this skill, or these skills right now are loaded out for the new trial. You're going to want to run Crushing Shock, especially as a ranged DPS, and even if you're kiting. But on the first boss, I think it's Lothus or something like that, he has this attack that basically, it's almost like the opposite of breath, or opposite of the oh, what is that Templar heal, the ultimate? I forget what it is, but basically it like shoots those healing springs to everybody, and it like keeps them alive. It is the exact opposite of that. And if you get hit by like 2 or 3 and the boss doesn't get interrupted, you are going to go down. And so you want at least 2 of your ranged DPS running Crushing Shock, so they can interrupt the boss during their rotation and stop him from wiping the whole team, the whole group, because we have wiped from that. We also run Bound Aegis, because we get an extra 8% max magic. We get Minor Resolve, Minor Ward with that physical and spell resistance. Not a huge deal. 1300 spell resistance is, and physical resistance is not going to be what determines whether you die or not. I mean, every little bit helps, but that's not why we're running this. We're running it because we get that max magic. Shock Clench. Since we're running Crushing Shock, you could run, or since we're using this, the Force Balls, spammable, you could essentially run Crystal Frags. I don't recommend it. One, it messes up the rotation because sometimes you want to get one Crystal Frags out on each front bar that you're on, and it doesn't always work that way. Shock Clench does the same amount of damage, but over time, and it also has an AoE effect. So this is a lot easier to fit into our rotation. We do it once each rotation, and it does the same damage as one Crystal Frags, but we don't have to wait for the proc. So we get to determine when it happens, not RNG. And again, what we want here is consistent DPS. We do not want variables affecting how much we can parse, and how much we can parse in vet trials and stuff like that. So that's why Shock Clench, in my opinion, outperforms Crystal Frags, and I think that's been the case for a little while now. Back bar, very, very similar to everything else, or my other builds. Liquid Lightning, it's our biggest damage dealing ability. 100% uptime on this is important. Haunting Curse. Difference here is that with Daedric Prey you had to cast it on each back bar. With Haunting Curse you only cast it on every other. So the rotation does change a little bit with that, but I'll get into that in a minute. Blockade of Storms are like third biggest damage dealing ability, and then Mage's Wrath, Execute. If you are stacked on the boss real tight the whole time, like for Vet SO, and if there's a lot of Stam DPS on VAA and you're stacked behind the Mage, you want to run Boundless Storm. You will do more damage with that. I consistently hit about 400 more DPS. Is it a big difference? No. Does it save you more magic? Absolutely. Because at the end, if you're like trying to use this Execute and the boss still has, you know, like a point here, or an example would be the new trial. The last boss has like 100 million health. When he's at 20%, he still has, when he's an Execute, he still has like 20 million health. You're not going to be casting this the whole time. Now again, since that last boss, everybody's so spread out, you're not going to use Boundless Storm. You are going to use this, but my point is, some of the trials, if they're at 20%, people will just start spamming this Mage's Wrath, but they still got millions of health left, and you're running through all your magic, and then all of a sudden you run into sustain issues, you're at 0, and now you're just heavy attacking to get your resources back, and your DPS actually slows. So my best advice here is, if you're stacked on the boss real tight, use Boundless Storm. You get much more resistance, like 5,280, and that stacks on top of the minor resolve, minor ward. This is major resolve, major ward, so that stacks on top, and you're doing 1,000 shock damage every second for 23 seconds. You can cast this every other rotation on your back bar, and you can also it crits. And it typically crits very often. So I've always gotten 1,600 DPS out of this ability. Whereas with Mage's Wrath, it's usually around 1,200, 1,300. So I recommend running this if you're stacked close on the boss. It will help with sustain. And then I would use this if you have to play ranged, even in Execute. So that's kind of the flex spot. You can run some other things as well. And we run Meteor on the front bar for our extra magic on the front bar, and it helps because we do our heavy attack on the front bar, so we even restore more magic because our max magic is higher. So you want to make sure you do your heavy attack on the front bar. And we always open with Thunderous Rage, and only using meteors on, you know, enemies that are moving very often, because they may get dragged out of Thunderous Rage. Other things to note: Alchemy, you need to have it up at least so you can get medicinal use, getting your longer effects with your potions. Now, the big thing here I want to talk about, and the thing that Zos either needs to address, fix, something. As you can see, I'm running Inner Light on the front bar. Reason being is because that only adds extra magic, and it's another flex spot. It doesn't have to be there, but it helps having more magic there, and when you do that heavy attack, you get resources back. And in the passive, you get even extra magic in the Mage's Guild line, along with just an extra 5% from this ability being slotted itself. Now here's the problem. This ability gives you Major Prophecy, as you can read, increasing spell critical rating by 2,191 on your front bar. So while I'm on my front bar, my pot's down, I have Major Prophecy. Sounds good, right? Go to my back bar, it drops because it's not slotted, and that's fine. I don't have it on there because I want Major Prophecy. I get Major Prophecy from this. Essence of Spell Power gives us Major Sorcery, increasing spell damage, Major Prophecy, increasing spell crit, and restoring magic, while also giving us extra magic recovery. Very powerful and very needed. Absolutely a requirement. The problem is that this potion is being overrun by Inner Light. So say for instance, I pop my potion, I swap to my back bar, I'm going to lose that Major Prophecy, increasing spell crit. Even though I have the potion, because I'm dropping Inner Light to the back bar, for some reason the game's registering it as me dropping Major Prophecy, and it doesn't recognize that I still have it from my potion. So this needs to be fixed. I still managed to hit about 35k with this build, even though I only had like 50% uptime on Major Prophecy. But it's a serious issue because you're missing out on all that spell crit, and you're trying to get it from your potion. And I don't have it slotted because I want Major Prophecy. I have it slotted because I want that increased magic. So that's something that needs to be addressed or discussed, because that's a serious issue with this. So in the meantime, since we're not using it for Major Prophecy, we can just slot one of these other abilities and just not use it. I don't know if any give you anything bonus for just being slotted, because we can't slot Inner Light on the back bar. I mean, we don't have a flex spot here to do that as well, to have it double barred. So for now, just run Fire Rune, and that way when you parse and you use those pots, and when you're doing vet trials, you're not going to be having 50% uptime on your Major Prophecy. So that's the big thing. So let's go over the rotation here. So you want to start, you'll obviously apply Elemental Drain, use your pot, and then you would apply your Thunderous Rage, and then you would do Liquid Lightning, Light Attack, Blockade of Storms, Light Attack, Haunting Curse, Light Attack, Bar Swap, Light Attack, Crushing Shock, Light Attack, Crushing Shock, Light Attack, Crushing Shock, Heavy Attack, Shock Clench, and then if you're obviously applying Elemental Drain yourself, you just Light Attack, Elemental Drain. Bar Swap, Liquid Lightning, Light Attack, Blockade, Light Attack, Bar Swap, since Haunting Curse should still be up. Light Attack, Force Pulse, or Crushing Shock, do that 3 times. Heavy Attack to get resources, Shock Clench, and you can animation cancel it, and then Light Attack, Elemental Drain, or just Elemental Drain. The thing about Elemental Drain is you don't have to be there for the whole time. You can bar swap and it will cancel it, so do that. Now when you're parsing, unless you're really fast, I recommend doing something a little bit different. So in vet trials, you want to do the 3 Crushing Shocks on the front bar. You'll want to do 1, 2, 3. You're going to get more damage that way. When you are parsing by yourself, I actually got more damage not doing that. Reason being is because, say you do this, and I need to apply Elemental Drain now, and I'm doing that, and then Shock Clench, and then Elemental Drain. I just lost Liquid Lightning and Blockade, and those are like 2 huge damage dealing abilities, like 2 out of the 3 highest. So if you're playing Elemental Drain by yourself, it's actually better. This, 1, 2, and then go into Shock Clench, and then Elemental Drain, and then Liquid Lightning. It's almost 100% uptime. Now in trials, I recommend doing the 3. Because watch, do that, and then Shock Clench, and you can animate, you can bar swap and animation cancel. It's actually really smooth. It looks good. So let's wait for Liquid Lightning to go away, and I'll kind of show you what it will look like. So we open up, Liquid Lightning, boom, boom, boom. I'm going to lose this Blockade a little bit. So, that's my recommendation. If you're parsing, you want to get higher numbers. It doesn't matter that much, honestly. Like, you're still going to pull more. You're going to be at like 33, 34, but I was able to hit 35 when I used, only did 2 of the force, or shock and clenches. And then when you're parsing, just use your execute. If you want to parse and get a little bit even higher numbers, you can also just slot that Boundless Storm, like I said, and stand kind of close, and that way you get a little bit more damage from there. But again, depends on the group composition, depends on your vet trials leader and what they want, because I don't know, I mean, it's worked for me, but it's, again, like, it depends on the fight and how close you are. I don't think I'm missing anything else. Covered pretty much everything. Just major thing here is just getting your gear optimization due to the VMA Lightning Staff change. Again, if you don't have one and this doesn't apply to you, I recommend just running 2 Julianos and Ice Heart. You could also do, if you've managed to get it, I don't know if I have 2 of them, I think I only have 1. Let's see. Edge. Oh. I should have the light of the niches. Oh, that's why I messed up. Yeah, I only have 1. You can use 2 of these if you happen to have 2. That way you have 5-piece niches, and then you could still do 4-piece Moondancer if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah. Or if you have 2 Moondancer staves, you can keep 4-piece Moondancer and then this. Or if you don't have Moondancer at all, you can run 5 Julianos using 2 staves, and then 5 Netch's Touch with Ice Heart. But other than that, I think that's pretty much it. I'd just like to say thank you for watching and keep me posted on the channel. I'll keep posting more parses and whatnot, and you'll see it parse right now shortly after this, and it will give you an idea of how the rotation works in quick time. If you have any questions about the rotation, suggestions for the community, again, this is to help everybody reach those numbers easily as possible, so everybody can kind of experience the in-game content that exists. So yeah, if you have anything to add, just post it in the comments below. Any constructive criticism and friendly advice is always welcome on the channel, and thank you guys for watching.